You've seen the headlines, the protests, the pushback.
We want education, not indoctrination.
The ongoing controversy over how schools teach Black history in the state of Florida. Tonight in our Fractured series that examines where we are divided and how we can unite, our 10 Investigates team heads to Tallahassee.
We start first with Morrow, who looks into the state's law requiring Black history education and why some say districts get by teaching the bare minimum.
This battle over teaching Black history is fracturing our state, but the law mandating what must be taught has been on the books for nearly 30 years, yet just 16% of Florida school districts get high marks on how well they educate students in this area.
And we discovered the task force responsible for evaluating those districts has been shrinking.
So we headed to Tallahassee for answers in an exclusive story you will only see right here on 10 Tampa Bay.
This is my illustrious university.
Attending FAMU changed Marie Radigan's life.
Oh man, Florida A&M University means love, means charity, means unity, means history.
Black history, something she says she learned more of here than she ever did in Florida public schools.
You just learn the basic level history. You learn about Martin Luther King, the surface level of Martin Luther King, not the radical Martin Luther King. You learn about Rosa Parks, and you just learn about like basic things.
But the Florida legislature passed a law in the mid-90s that requires going beyond the basics. Just look, students are supposed to learn African and African American history, including what happened to Africans before slavery in America. But is that happening the way it should across Florida's 67 school districts?
Only 11 of those districts have instituted any substantial influence or infusion of African American history.
I will make this available.
Meet Bernadette Kelly Brown. She's the principal investigator for the Commissioner of Education's African American History Task Force. The group's been around for nearly 30 years, and its mission is to help districts implement the state's law on Black history. But with limited power, it's been tough.
I just wanted to make sure that we have some decision-making authority as a task force.
10 Investigates Jenna, Bourne, and I went to Florida A&M University in Tallahassee for the group's annual public meeting and were the only reporters there as members talked with the Department of Education about the fragile state of Black history instruction in Florida. This year alone, districts have pulled books for review and in one case, a movie on civil rights icon Ruby Bridges over fears about racial content.
It's apparent that individuals are trying to rewrite history.
And Governor DeSantis even faced a lawsuit threat after the state rejected an AP African American Studies course, citing concerns with critical race theory.
We have guidelines and standards in Florida. We want education, not indoctrination. If you fall on the side of indoctrination, we're going to decline.
Are we going to let Governor DeSantis or anybody exterminate Black history from the classrooms of Florida?
But task force members say making sure this history is adequately taught is a challenge.
How much of an impact has the task force had on the curriculum across the state?
Not very much to this point. So out of the 67 districts, there are only 11 who have been deemed exemplary.
Districts have to apply for this distinction. In our area, only Pinellas and Hillsborough made this list. Sarasota says it's interested in applying. Pasco says it is too.
We have 6 criteria where districts, if they're looking to get that type of approval or endorsement, they must provide critical documentation, proof of their infusion and the teaching and training of African and African American history in their district.
It sounds like what you guys consider exemplary should be standard.
It should be. I agree. but it hasn't been.
The task force does not control what local districts teach, the classes they offer, or even the books they use.
I'm hoping that legislation will be passed that gives more or asks for more accountability from districts on required instruction, because it does say it is required. It's not if you want to or if you think about it, it's required instruction.
We tried to talk to the Department of Education at the task force's annual public meeting last month.
I just have a couple questions about how African American history is taught in this classroom.
Like I told Jenna, if you guys want to send your questions to us, I'd be happy to provide responses, okay?
We did, but haven't heard back. We just wanted to know how the Department of Education holds districts accountable. The task force told us in 2019 the department created a portal for districts to report how they teach Black history. But the task force says it does not go far enough.
No financial or any other sanctions that would happen to districts if they hadn't, followed the required instructions.
Are you satisfied with what you've seen in the portal?
It has pretty much checked a box. So it's nothing, no documented citations or evidence that is being done. It's just ask the question, do you do this? Do you do that? And you can say yes, no.
So no accountability?
No accountability.
A DOE vice chancellor talked about the portal at the task force meeting. We tried to catch up with her too.
Dr. Ani, hi. I'm Emerald Morrow with 10 Tampa Bay. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. I just have a couple questions.
I have to step into another, to make a call, but
okay.
If you have any questions, please do send them to our communications office.
Again, we did follow up and we're still waiting to hear back. During the wait, we went through the portal. For the 2021-2022 school year, all of our local districts posted reports and implementation plans for teaching Black history. And there was a lot of variation. Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Polk all offer African American history courses. Citrus, Hardy, Hernando, Highlands, and Pasco don't have any. They say African American history is embedded in civics and history curriculums. And Pasco just formed a Black History task force of its own to improve its offerings. But a textbook listed in the portal for Citrus schools raises questions. The district uses a version of The American Pageant, which has a map that refers to enslaved Africans as immigrants. The publisher, though, told me that the map in question is now updated in new books to show, quote, the influx of new arrivals to the U.S. in 1775 was driven by both free and enslaved people. But districts using this book might not have the newest edition.
But it's still up to the districts to choose which books they want to adopt.
A challenge for the task force and for those hungry to learn their history.
We need to teach American history, the good, bad, and the ugly, right? We shouldn't be selective on what we're teaching.
Now, if you want to search this portal for yourself or see what it takes for districts to earn this exemplary status, head to 10tampabay.com/10investigates. And Jenna is going to be back for part 2 of this story tomorrow.
We uncovered the state's African American History Task Force is shrinking. I mean, really shrinking. You can catch this tomorrow at 6 on 10 Tampa Bay. And if you don't want to wait, you can also watch this episode of our YouTube series, What's Brewing Right Now. And the state agency in charge of appointing new members to that task force has been avoiding our questions for weeks. Emerald, it's yet another battle over how Black history is being taught.
Yes, while teaching it is required under Florida law, only 11 out of the state's 67 school districts are doing an exemplary job, according to the task force.
We went to Tallahassee to hold the Department of Education accountable.
Stand up right now! We will never surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die.
Okay, so how did we get here? Earlier this year, Governor Ron DeSantis' administration blocked an advanced placement course on African American studies, saying the curriculum is being used to indoctrinate students into woke ideology.
This course on Black history, what's one of the lessons about? Queer theory. They have stuff about intersectionality, abolishing prisons. That's a political agenda.
Take a look at this Florida Department of Education training PowerPoint on library media and instructional materials, dated January 2023. It says factors to consider include avoiding unsolicited theories that may lead to student indoctrination. Last year, the governor signed the Individual Freedom Act, also known as the Stop Woke Act, which among other things, made changes to Florida's law requiring that students learn about Black history. It added that classroom instruction and curriculum may not be used to indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view. That law also says the Education Department may seek input from the Commissioner of Education's African American History Task Force on Black history standards and curriculum.
We don't have time to waste.
You know, this task force, the one created to help schools comply with the state law requiring them to teach Black history. And we've uncovered that task force is shrinking. I mean, really shrinking.
So we've got to get support from your office to get some people on this task force.
We traveled to Tallahassee for this African American History Task Force meeting. It might look packed, but the truth is, only 2 voting members of the task force are actually here. Dr. Brenda Walker and Vice Chair Dr. Samuel Wright. Most of the other people in this room are Department of Education employees. Oh yeah, and us, the only members of the public who showed up to this public meeting on Florida A&M University's campus. The meeting notice had the wrong building and room number, so we may or may not have wound up locked in a stairwell beforehand.
We need you to come save us.
But only for about 5 minutes.
Anybody out there?
Anyway, Dr. Wright says this is the smallest number of members they've ever had at a meeting. And although the group's website shows 7 people on the task force members page, only 4 of them are actually voting members. Dr. Walker and Dr. Wright, who you saw in the meeting, and Dr. Donna Austin and Tracy Oliver, who were not there. As the task force's principal investigator, Dr. Bernadette Kelly Brown doesn't get to vote. Congresswoman Frederica Wilson and State Senator Geraldine Thompson are emerita members. Those are legacy roles, so they can participate in the group's activities, but they can't vote. We used an internet archiving tool called the Wayback Machine to look at snapshots of the task force's website over the past several years. In December 2019, the site showed there were 13 members. Again, now there are 7, and only 4 can vote. No chairperson, only a vice chair. That's him.
We've lost quite a few along the way.
What happened?
I guess they just could no longer serve or whatever. So it's just, they just falling off and resigning for other purposes, other reasons.
People on the task force tell us they've been vetting and recommending new members to the Florida Department of Education, but the Education Commissioner hasn't appointed anyone in years. For weeks, we called and emailed 7 people within the Department of Ed more than a dozen times about the group's dwindling membership. We sent questions and public records requests and requests to interview the Education Commissioner. I'm calling again to follow up on our interview request with Manny Diaz. No one got back to us. So we showed up at their office in Tallahassee. We're checking to see if Commissioner Manny Diaz is here today. Security had me talk to his assistant on the phone. No, I haven't heard from him yet. That's why we're here. She told me she'd see if Diaz could talk the next week. Spoiler alert, that didn't happen. At the task force meeting the next day, Department of Education spokesperson Cassie Palelis didn't want to talk. Is there a reason we haven't been able to get any answers?
This is a work group meeting, a task force meeting, and so we're not taking questions at this time.
Well, when are you taking questions? Because we've been emailing you and calling you with questions for weeks. When can we expect to hear back?
We'll take a look at your questions. Thank you.
Okay, let's try another person I've been reaching out to. Cindy Huffman, the liaison between the Department of Ed and the task force. The new bylaws
to our press office.
I've been trying and they haven't responded to me either.
Dr. Ani, I have to refer you to that.
I'm sorry?
I need to refer you to Dr. Ani.
Okay, let's try Dr. Ani.
If you could provide them to the communications office.
I certainly have been for weeks.
Yes, and we'll be happy to follow up.
They didn't.
I'm getting grayer and grayer. And we need to get some answers.
During the meeting, Huffman said she would send the task force a list of prospective new members nominated by the Department of Education and people currently on the task force the following week. That didn't happen either. How would you describe the current state of Black history education in Florida?
Well, it's sort of like at a dead end. When we look at the message we're getting from the governor's office versus what we're getting from the Commissioner of Education's office, there's a disconnect because one group is saying one thing and another group is saying something else. We need to come together so we can make some things happen in the state of Florida.
After 10 investigates uncovered the state's African American History Task Force was shrinking, the state took action. Tonight, the new concern over who is now joining. We begin tonight with that investigation as some question whether it's progress or a political move. This is 10 Tampa Bay at 6. I'm Carolina Lee.
And I'm Dave Wagner. Right now, the state has taken action after our 10 Investigates team exposed issues with that task force.
After Jenna Bourne's investigation, the state appointed 6 new members. But Jenna found there's much more to the story than that. And their first meeting less than 24 hours ago got heated.
We found that the Florida Department of Education is stacking the African American History Task Force with allies of Governor Ron DeSantis. Some are openly anti-woke and opposed to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And current members tell us they were never consulted about their new colleagues. Surrounded by images of civil rights figures and educators, this is Leaders Row. The path in Tampa's Perry Harvey Park felt like the right place for this conversation.
All our students need is an opportunity. First of all, to find out who they are and understand the richness of their culture.
You might remember African American History Task Force Vice Chair Dr. Samuel Wright from our previous story.
We shouldn't just talk about Harriet Tubman or talk about Rosa Parks. We need to talk about all of the contributions that black folk have made in America.
Florida law requires schools to teach black history, and the Florida Commissioner of Education's African American History Task Force helps districts comply. In April, we reported that task force had shrunk to just 4 voting members. Only 2 of them showed up to the most recent meeting. The Department of Ed hadn't appointed any new people in years, despite members recommending nominees to the state. Days after our investigation came out, Dr. Wright wrote this letter. He asked the Department of Ed to appoint new members before July 1st and asked for a list of nominees they were considering immediately. A couple weeks later, on May 12th, task force members got this email saying the Department of Ed had appointed 6 new members effective May 11th. You know, the day before. Did the Department of Education consult any sitting members of the task force on these new appointees?
No, not at all.
How did it feel being told after the fact?
It wasn't a good feeling. It really wasn't.
Task force members tell us they didn't nominate any of the people selected. It's unclear who nominated or vetted these people because the Department of Ed still hasn't responded to any of our questions. But the letter those new members got says it was Education Commissioner Manny Diaz who ultimately appointed them.
We don't need to be, things need to be shoved down our throats about what needs to be done. And I thought it would be nice had they shared those with us prior to making those final appointments. And as long as they don't stifle the progress of the committee, then fine, we welcome them.
We looked into each new member's background and found 5 out of the 6 are active in Republican politics. 4 of the 6 have previously been appointed to positions by Governor Ron DeSantis. Only 2 of the 6 have been a school board member or worked for a school district. Out of all of these new appointees, Florida House Representative Bernie Jacques is the only one who agreed to talk to us. He represents Largo and parts of Seminole, Pinellas Park, and Clearwater.
So my goals with the task force is to make sure when it comes to African American history that we are involved in education, which is very important, and not indoctrination. And really just teach our students the basics and not ideologies that makes them either hate each other or hate their country.
In his first legislative session, he co-sponsored a bill that the governor signed into law in May, banning Florida colleges and universities from spending public money on programs or campus activities that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI. Do you think DEI has a place in K-12 schools?
I don't. This DEI concept, it really puts a damper, especially if you're a minority student, that somehow the chips are stacked against you, that somehow past occurrences are holding you back now.
So you don't think that past occurrences in the Black community are holding back those children now?
No, this is a land of tremendous opportunities. And when we teach history, we should teach it all, right? The good, bad, the ugly, everything in between. But to tell somebody today in 2023 that because of the way they look, that they're somehow less likely to succeed, I think it's wrong. I would not be where I am today if I thought that.
We asked him about the Stop Woke Act that Governor DeSantis signed into law last year. Among other things, it changed Florida's law requiring students to learn about Black history, adding that classroom instruction and curriculum may not be used to indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view.
Are you a supporter of the Stop Woke Act?
Absolutely, 100%.
What does woke mean to you?
Well, woke to me is Marxist ideology. So it's a divisive ideology that pits people against each other based on the way they look.
We want to point out that's not how Governor DeSantis' own lawyer defines it. During court proceedings in December over the governor's ousting of Hillsborough State Attorney Andrew Warren, which is a whole story in itself, Florida Politics reported that DeSantis' general counsel, Ryan Newman, was asked to define woke. And he responded that woke is the belief there are systemic injustices in American society and the need to address them.
Florida is where woke goes to die. Woke, die.
The task force had its first meeting together on June 7th, and things got heated.
Please be respectful, no matter how long.
I am respectful, but I want to make sure that we get the respect too. We've been dealing with this for years, and I just think it's a bit much for us to do that.
Pardon the interruption. Please allow me, please. So please excuse the interruption. I would like to remind you that all task force members, and I've not heard anyone say otherwise, are educated, accomplished professional adults. So let's please maintain a tone of respect and civility as you represent the Commissioner of Education in the public eye.
And the first vote taken was a 6-4 split, precisely divided between new members and old, to postpone the task force's virtual summer institute next week, which hundreds of educators were scheduled to attend.
The motion on the floor is to postpone the scheduled summer institute that is currently scheduled for June 14th and 15th for a short time until after the State Board of Education has adopted the revised African-American history, the new African-American history standards.
That adoption is expected to happen next month, but no new date has been set for the Summer Institute.
Just hearing that, new standards go into effect come July 1, I think we're sliding the opportunity for all of our educators to have the new standards and use it.
I find it very interesting that the new task force members, and it seems like all of them, have made a decision that they want to pause something that many of them have said that they don't even know anything about.
The Florida Department of Education still hasn't answered a single question that we've sent them on task force membership since March, or responded to any of our public records requests.
We're not taking questions at this time.
Well, when are you taking questions? Because we've been emailing you and calling you with questions for weeks. We'll keep reaching out, and Dr. Wright says he plans to keep speaking out.
Well, I prefer to die than to sit here and be put back 50 or 100 years in the state of Florida. That's not what I signed on for, and I worked too hard. I'm 69 years old, close to 70. I've lived too long to see this kind of nonsense.
We did a deep dive into all 6 of the new task force members' backgrounds. You can find out more about their views and experience right now at 10tampabay.com.
The vice chair of Florida's African American History Task Force has now resigned, and 10 Investigate's Jenna Bourne broke this story online today. She's been covering issues with that task force for months now, and Jenna, he says he's livid.
That's because the new task force members voted to postpone the group's most important event of the year. The Summer Institute happens every year around Juneteenth. Hundreds of Florida educators and presenters from around the country were scheduled to participate next week. Now, it's been indefinitely postponed.
I was at the signing of the legislation of the African American History Task Force. I was at the signing of that legislation.
And now Florida's African American History Task Force Vice Chair, Dr. Samuel Wright, is resigning.
This whole issue with the task force meeting was an insult, not only to me, but to other members who've been involved in this task force for years.
We told you in April that the task force had been shrinking for years. After our investigation, the Florida Department of Education appointed 6 new members. 5 out of the 6 are active in Republican politics. 4 have previously been appointed to positions by Governor Ron DeSantis. State Representative Bernie Jacques is the only new member who agreed to talk to us on camera.
So my goals with the task force is to make sure when it comes to African American history that we are involved in education, which is very important, and not indoctrination. And really just teach our students the basics and not ideologies that makes them either hate each other or hate their country.
The old and new members of the task force came together for their first meeting this week, and things got heated.
This has been one of the most asinine discussions I've had in a long time.
The first vote taken was a 6-4 split, precisely divided between new members and old, to postpone the task force's virtual Summer Institute, which hundreds of educators were scheduled to attend.
The motion on the floor is to postpone the scheduled Summer Institute that is currently scheduled for June 14th and 15th for a short time until after the State Board of Education has adopted the revised African American history, the new African American history standards.
That adoption is expected to happen next month, but no new date has been set for the Summer Institute.
Just hearing that, new standards go into effect come July 1, I think we're sliding the opportunity for all of our educators to have the new standards and use it.
For people to get to the table, disregard what work had been done, didn't ask any questions about looking at an agenda or what is being planned. Their first motion was to postpone it. I've had some health challenges this past 3 or 4 months, and for the life of me, I will not let people take me down by dealing with this kind of issue. So if it's too stressful, I prefer to get on the outside of it and deal with it that way and not internally.
You can find our 2 previous investigations on the African American History Task Force by checking out our YouTube series, What's Brewing. Take out your phone or tablet because this QR code will take you right there. Scan it with your camera app and a link will pop up for our What's Brewing playlist.